episode from Pivot on advancing your career for higher growth and pay in 2026. I'm your host, Arjun Prakash, and with me, I have a very interesting and experienced speaker, Vikrant Mathur, who will be joining us in a second. But the reason we are doing this workshop today is because we have seen, during the year end, one of the most common questions that mid-career professionals have is how do they really level up their career in the new year, where they don't get stuck into appraisal conversations focusing on only the past performance, but also future hikes, future elevation of their role, responsibilities, etc. So that's what we're going to cover today. Without further ado, I'm going to bring our guest speaker, Vikrant Mathur, here. Hey, Vikrant.
Hey, hey Arjun. Great to connect on the program.
Yes, welcome again, and thank you again so much for making time for this. I really appreciate you being interested and available in this. So, before we get started, Vikrant, I think we can just do a quick round of intros, and what I can do is go first, would then turn it over to you. So, people who don't
Sure.
know me, my name is Arjun, and I'm the founder at Pivot. What we do here is help both early and mid-career professionals navigate different types of career transitions. They could be just a job search where you're going from one level to another, so more like an advancement from IC to manager or leadership roles. But they also frequently are more of an inflection point in career shifts, so people changing their domains, their industries, sometimes returning to work after a bit of a gap. So all of these different types of inflection points is where we specialize, and we have worked with over 10,000 professionals, providing a lot of end-to-end solutions in terms of both online AI tools as well as support from a large network of top industry experts. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Vikrant. Vikrant, welcome again. And if you could just share a bit about yourself, about your journey and what you're doing today, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Arjun. It's great to get together with Pivot on this particular program, as well as know more about how your organization works in helping people revamp their careers and make it shine. I am an HR professional working for over 20 years across industry with media, telecom, consumer durables, and various other companies. I'm recently changing the way I introduce myself. I put myself as a business leader with HR skills, and I'm currently also in the process of revamping my own HR skills. I'm going through a program on senior leadership HR with ISB. So that's kind of putting myself up in the academic field and learning more about HR. I've worked across NDTV, Delphi, which is an automotive multinational company, headed HR for Bose, the audio company, for over 6 years. Managed HR business partnering, talent acquisition, the complete employee life cycle across India and some of the Asia Pacific countries as well. So it's good to be here, and this topic is very very relevant, more in terms of the situation today where the business dynamic is changing from the whether it's manufacturing, production, or service industries or tech industries, and also in terms of how the employee dynamic is changing with terms of the newer opportunities that are coming up in the market and how people want to upskill themselves and kind of grow constantly in their careers. So very very relevant subject here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I agree there is. Sorry, did you want to add something?
No, 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 no. Yeah.
Okay. I was just saying, I think definitely very interesting times to be a mid-career professional. And I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, I feel like there's been a paradigm shift in how opportunities are evolving very, very rapidly. In the sense that the expectations from companies for variety of roles, as well as how mid-career professionals navigate transitions, whether it's just leveling up. So going from junior, mid-level to senior leadership levels, or sometimes changing your path from one to another, and not necessarily 180-degree shifts, but within the field, kind of upskilling yourself similar to yourself, how you are doing it right now. I think that's becoming much more prevalent and a very, very common question that we come across as to how do I position myself strongly for the future. And so in that vein, we chose today's topic about how to advance your career from a higher pay and growth perspective for the new year.
Absolutely.
So I think where we can start, Vikrant, is kind of a little broad and bird's eye view of what do you think are the most important factors that one should keep in mind as the year is closing with regard to structuring their appraisal conversation, not just from a pay and promotion standpoint, but kind of making the organization, the team, and themselves highlight the biggest achievements and perhaps areas of improvement, areas of development that they want to pursue in the near future. So what are some of the critical factors that they should be keeping in mind as they are structuring their thoughts around this time of the year?
Sure, Arjun. I'd like to put, two different things, to begin the discussion. One is being an HR leader. I'm a very high active employee proponent HR person. So yes, I'll definitely talk about how an individual needs to project himself or herself through these kind of conversations. But it's also important as an employee to understand what's going on in the company and then kind of link it with one's performance and growth as well. So I will want to talk about both those factors, and I'd also say that we normally think that the growth in our careers is going to come through our managers or the business leaders who we work for. But ultimately, it's our responsibility as individuals to go through whatever we need to through that entire you know, annual work cycle rather than just thinking about what's going to be during our annual performance review cycle or like a career progression cycle and things like that. I think the critical factors that one should look at is to understand at the beginning of the year what are the key objectives, what are the KRAs, etc., that the organization is setting up for a particular individual. How is it linked to the overall business objective of the company? What's the kind of revenue numbers, EBITDA numbers that the company is targeting, and how that's linked to our particular profile? um, and then constantly because it's not just a one time process, or like it's a biannual process and things like that. I would still say take it on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis. At least do your self evaluation in terms of how you're progressing on those targets, where you are slipping up, what's catching pace, what are you able to close at a faster pace. And I think the main term here would be constant feedback. You're constantly giving feedback in, feedback out, in terms of the team that you're working with. It's not just your manager who you work for, it's the entire team. So it's ensuring that all stakeholders are aligned together. Whether the responsibilities that you are handling, if that kind of impacts another team member of yours, how that's shaping up, because it's ultimately the entire team effort. And I remember watching a video from one of Simon Sinek's leadership programs and stuff like that, and he talks about something called a high performance, high trust individual. Okay, so that's a different thought process in itself, which is like high performance is good. That's what people are evaluated on in terms of the targets they achieved, or the sales numbers that they did and stuff like that. But it's important about how high trustworthy that individual is. How does that person perform when the organization's not doing well? How does the person perform when he or she takes along other colleagues at work? How does he handle problems? Does the person come up and just put their hands up and says, I'm in a problem situation, save me? Or is this person someone who comes and solves problems and works closely with aligning with the organization's ultimate goals? So this should be like a full
Yeah.
process on month, in terms of checks and balances. And I think it's important that you have regular conversations, whether formal or informal, at your level with the people who you work with, to understand how it's shaping up for you, so that if there are certain business changes, there's so much of uh, change that's happening across organizations. Some business plans do move further, some need to pause in between, and some need to be tweaked because of, they may, if a company is wanting to get into a new market, and maybe that new market doesn't have the potential right away as you had planned, you may have to rejig the formalities. So if it's there on your objective to raise revenues in a new market, and maybe that new market never happened, it's important for you to kind of immediately find out, okay, what's going to be my next objective, or how am I going to change it, and things like that, to
Yeah.
be able to constantly understand how you are shaping up, with regards to the objectives there. And then closer to the annual performance cycle would come the regular processes, with regards to, the self evaluation, and the entire performance review discussion, and things like
Right.
that.
So I think that's very helpful to give a overview of like the entire process and kind of the key factors to highlight, as you mentioned, like where you have created biggest impact in terms of your KRAs. How to sort of position yourself as somebody who's going above and beyond to solve the organizational challenges and achieve the most important goals. Um, what I have realized though, in practice, a lot of times people, um, they struggle to differentiate themselves compared to a lot of other peers when they're actually doing the self-evaluation, or trying to highlight why they should be promoted, why they should get uh, pay hikes. I think the reason is because a lot of times folks are not thinking about this throughout the year, in a very active or proactive manner,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
They're kind of just checking the box of whatever has been asked of them to do. They're trying to achieve their quarterly goals or semi-year goals, but they're doing it in a way which is very much just whatever is expected of them. Um, at the year end, they struggle to position themselves somebody who has actually gone above and beyond to not just do what has been expected, but what actually drove outcomes, and what may have sometimes been outside of their core ambit as well. So let's talk a little bit about that, because there is a little bit of a contention in this topic here, because
Yeah.
some people feel that, hey, I did my job, now I should be basically allowed to get a hike, a promotion within a reasonable period of time because I've done what was asked of me.
Yes.
But at the same time, organizations don't always give you what you want based on just checking the boxes. They are looking for superstars. They're looking for people who don't need to be asked, like you said, right? Like someone who's just raising their hand saying, "Hey, I have a problem. Please
Yeah.
help, or let's work together to solve this," as opposed to somebody who's actually taking proactive charge towards solving that problem without being asked and getting the job
Sure.
done, right? How do we balance this where folks don't feel like they have to really hustle extremely hard, go above and beyond what is asked of them, but at the same time are able to actually prove themselves as the top 10% talent within the company to get the best opportunities, hikes, promotions, etc.
I understand. Yeah. So there'll be, different types of people. One would be people who are more extroverted, aggressive, who would be comfortable in terms of, defining very clearly what they've done through the year, and laying down their expectations, in black and white. There'll be some people who'd be a little introverted, who may have done a lot, but may not have the communication skills to kind of express it in a clear manner. And there are some set of people who just take it saying, okay, this is the company process, let me follow the process and see how the organization does gets back to me. I think it's very important at regular stages to be very honest in terms of clearly mentioning with data the kind of work that you have achieved in correlation with the objectives that have been set up. It's important that you're mentioning in your self evaluation how it's aligned with the larger purpose of the organization, in terms of if a particular salesperson's targets are getting 20% up sales, and that led to achievement of the revenue margins of the organization at a particular country level or regional level or whatever. That link should be very clearly shown there. And it's important that through the year, as well as in the self evaluation, that the employee showcases his or her aspiration to move forward in their careers, how they've helped, how they've kind of took on those tough situations and handled it themselves to be successful. That's very important. And I think it's the conversation in itself can sometimes seem a little overwhelming. I've had some when I'm mid-level professionals still. I may have done a couple of performance reviews to understand how things work, but for employees who are maybe in the 2 to 3 year experience bracket are still new to it, and may just put very generic information there. So it's important that when you're writing in your self evaluation, you should constantly think as to, if you are evaluating yourself, how does that happen? So you're not going over, and you're not also not going under, in terms of the communication that you're mentioning there. And you also, it's important that you mention how you've overcome certain challenges. You've taken up a difficult situation, what kind of obstacles came up, or something that you couldn't achieve. How would you think of it, and change it? There's something called a star approach, a
Right.
situation task.
So Vikrant, just sorry to interject, just a question there, right? Just to kind of give people a little more practical level insight in terms of how they could do it. Do you have maybe an example of sort that you could point out with regard to exactly what you just said, where somebody in your experience did that really well, and was able to drive certain, optimize career outcomes, whether it's growth, pay, hikes, etc.
Yeah, so I have a real life example of a team member in sales in one of my previous employments, where an individual, because of certain family reasons, couldn't perform well at all in a smaller town city, and to the extent that he had to be put on a performance improvement plan. And the normal feedback from anybody is, if you're put on a performance improvement plan, you expect that that individual is going to be moved out of the company. And this person really understood that in the past he had been a good performer, and suddenly, because of certain reasons, his performance dipped. And it was at every stage of the year. He was a salesperson, so he understood what were the requirements of the company. He constantly reported what were the kind of challenges that were coming up. He understood how the business was changing month on month or quarter on quarter, and constantly took feedback from his managers, from his stakeholders around. He worked closely with people who were reporting into him in terms of understanding their challenges, and kind of resolving them at a faster pace. And it was also important that this individual gave market feedback back to the company. So, because there were a lot of assumptions that, okay, maybe I can say that this person was working in the southern part of the country, and there were certain revenue numbers that we wanted to achieve there. But he got back to the organization and mentioned that the customer base here, instead of products X and Y, prefer products A and B more. So why don't we concentrate on that? So it was important that he provided that information to the company to change their overall strategy quickly, so that those numbers and those targets was achieved, and he
Hmm.
became the high performing employee in a span of about 10 months,
Hmm.
and quickly moved out of his PIP kind of a situation as well. So I say, if you put your mind to it, and if you think of it seriously, we normally in our routine work day just think about tasks and activities, and how we close the emails of the day.
Yeah.
But I think once a week, or maybe an hour every week or something, we should spend time on ourselves and evaluate how did we do the whole week, and what were our challenges, and how we're going to overcome what's the future question marks and ambiguity coming up for us.
Yeah. That's a really good example. I mean, especially feels very impactful going from being in PIP to a high performer. I think that's quite a remarkable transition within a very short period of time. But I think the more important thing to realize is what the actionables of this individual was, right? In terms of how he ultimately, or she, I don't know, how they helped the company um, understand the most important pieces of information that they acted upon to get an advantage in the market, for example. I think that is what most people miss, because that may not be on your JD, that may not be part of something that you've been asked by your manager explicitly, but you take charge and proactively act like you're an owner in the company, or you're somebody who would want to
Absolutely.
drive results outside of your core requirements. So I think that's really powerful. I want to switch gears a little bit, Vikrant, and one of the most common questions we get at Pivot, right? Which is
Yeah.
again for mid-career professionals, folks anywhere between, I would say, 5, 6 years experience, all the way till about 20 years experience. They do have one common thread, no matter at which level they are, which is that the world is evolving very rapidly. My company is also asking me to upskill myself in certain new areas. And by the way, I'm not just talking about technology. Obviously engineers have to
Yeah.
always rapidly upgrade themselves, but apart from engineers, whether it's a sales and marketing professional, whether it's an HR professional like yourself, finance professional, world is changing quite rapidly, right? Both in terms of subject matter skill requirements as well as behavioral skill requirements. So a lot of people ask us this question, that how do I figure out what are my gaps that might be holding me back and not letting me achieve my full potential, because of which I'm not getting the right kind of growth opportunities, exposure, pay hike. So people link a lot of their stagnation in their careers to lack of opportunities, which a lot of times is related to your lack of skills, right? Apart from, I mean, internal politics and all that, which an individual can't
Yeah.
always control and navigate,
Sure.
skills has been one of the key factors. So how do you help mid-career professionals in this particular regard?
So I'd say there are various things that one could do in terms of upskilling. First, it's important to find out what are the skills that you really need in the kind of role that you're working in. Okay, so the most formal mechanism could be to speak with your managers or your business leaders and try and identify how your role is going to shape up in the next 6 months to 2 year period, and how you are in terms of the capability performance matrix for those particular tasks. So if you understand that a particular, just giving an example, an HR business partner or an HR talent acquisition person needs to start working on an HR technology activity. So he or she needs to understand what's a success factors, or what's a Darwin box, or a workday mechanism and things like that, and gain some information there. The other mechanisms is it's important to stay abreast, from an industry standpoint, like your organization, Pivot, organizing these kind of webinars and stuff like that. That's a whole bunch of stuff available through LinkedIn Learning. A lot of companies provide LinkedIn Learning licenses and stuff like that. There are various, I'd say, HR professionals could go through programs from National HRD Network and stuff like that. So there are a lot of free as well as paid related skill development workshops, etc., that are available in the market. And these days, I think it's you should not think whether this is going to help me or not. If it's something interesting to learn about, I just say just go ahead and enroll for it. Okay, you may use it after 6 months, you may not use it at all, but
Yeah.
you may just, it may help you in a professional conversation at a particular point in time. If some
Yeah.
other team member working in that domain needs help, you could just pitch in, and you could become a star in that activity. So it's important to kind of stay informed through the online sources. There are various kinds of courses and all of that available. I'm still old school, so I would say yes, reading up is also important. A whole bunch of books available on various things, and those kind of opportunities available. I'd also say it's time in India, for the next many years, for us to go back to academics as well. Okay, it's not just okay, you've done your MBA and you're good with life,
Mhm.
and you're going to become the business leader or the CXO in the company. It's important that you're constantly, if there are smaller courses available for a duration of 3 months, 6 months, at learning at your pace, online programs, some bit of weekend learning and stuff like that. That's important. And sometimes it's also important in terms of on the job skill updation. Okay, if you're a talent acquisition person and there's a colleague of yours who's also in, maybe a senior colleague in talent acquisition, who does great negotiation in terms of offers, I think one should work closely with that particular individual and learn from him or her what are the key skills that they have in terms of offer negotiations, or ensuring that candidates don't decline offers and come on board when they negotiate versus how I negotiate. I'm just giving an example. So
Mhm.
so it's important that on the job experience is also important. Sometimes you may be working with a legal person on a particular project. We
Mhm.
just think, okay, I'm a finance guy, why do I need to get involved? I'm working with a legal guy, but it's the legal guy's responsibility to do all the legal stuff. But there may be certain transactions that if you learn closely from the legal person, you get aware of it, and then can use it at a later stage once you go up the senior levels. Because at a mid level, it's more, the tasks are more operational, you got to get the work done. But when
Right.
you're moving up the career ladder, it's important for you to see that the overall perspective. So even if you are, whether you're HR or finance or marketing, as long as you have the overall perspective of a particular business, that's very important. So yeah, a mid-level, I can say, for HR, a mid-level HR person should also know what revenue margins and EBITDA margins and how to read balance sheets and things like that.
Right.
Because when that mid-level HR person becomes the head of HR for an organization, it's important for them to link HR strategy with finance strategy and then achieve the overall business objective. So I just put it on that.
Yeah. No, I think that part that you ended with is something. Given that I have myself had a career in HR consulting for about a decade before starting Pivot,
Yeah,
I firmly believe in that, especially HR professionals who have to earn their seat at the table, in the company, should 100% invest in themselves on learning, how does the company drive revenues? How does the company actually create, the right kind of profit margins, and drive business overall? So if you don't understand
sure.
you know the uh, the P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, your financial statements, you don't understand what are the key levers of success for the business from from a sales and marketing perspective. I think a lot of times
Absolutely.
you lose out the context, and you're not really seen as somebody deserving of the seat at the table. So I think
Yes.
that's a very powerful point, and I think it translates to almost every quote unquote support function, because even though, I mean, in COVID, HR became very strategically important given the change in the
Yeah.
workforce. But apart from those kind of black swan events, these support functions, they are not really seen as very critical to the core business, right? And I think the more value you can add in driving core business through the function that you're in, whether it's legal, whether it's HR, operations, marketing, anything. I think the more strategically important you're considered to the company. And on that note, we have a question from one of our audience members here, Shahan. uh,
Okay.
I'm going to pull it up here and see if it shows. Slightly hard to read, but his question is, how should one approach moving from a tactical support side role towards a more strategic, active role? If there's a resistance to this within the team, should that be looked at as a red flag? Now, just before you answer this, Vikrant, I wanted to quickly, you know, uh, summarize this question by saying, how can folks who are considered to be more in a support side role move closer to the gravitational force, or the power center of the company, which is usually related to driving revenues, profitability, growth, all of that?
So I'd say, Shahan, that's a good thought that's coming to your mind, and I'd say, nobody's. I'm from the opinion that nobody's born strategic to instantly take up strategic roles. The strategic guys do it well because they've had some operational experience in the past, and they know how to overcome the challenges, plan the activities in a manner that help drive the business. So it's important that in a support role, that's what I was just giving an example, that if one is an, sorry, I go back to HR because I'm an HR professional, but if I'm a talent acquisition person in HR, or if I'm an HR business partner and I'm doing my job well, I need to learn what new is coming up in HR. Okay, if the CHRO is developing some AI chatbot to kind of streamline HR operations, or give out specific employee information, or there's high level of HR data analytics that's going to come up in the company. If you kind of upskill yourself in that particular domain pretty quickly, on HR technology, on data analytics, if you're someone who's good with numbers, if you're good with the Power BIs and the Excels of the world, you could really stand out as an internal team member, because companies these days, talent crunch is the biggest problem that companies deal with in today's situation. So for if an internal team member can take on a project, it's important to look at those opportunities. It may not be a specific business title. I'm just giving an example. Suppose a project to set up an HR technology team is coming up in the next 2 years in your company. There may not be a full-time open position that may be advertised externally or internally for that team, because it's very much in the entry level situation. But if you express your desires to work or collaborate with that particular team, show your skills, how you've upskilled yourself, and try to work in that particular group, and once your skills are visible on the ground, you could have tremendous opportunity to move into a HR data analytics, or an HR technology role, which is extremely strategic, and you upgrade yourself from a talent acquisition or an HR business partner position right away. So, and sometimes, yeah, there may be red tape or politics, or those kind of things that happen in an organization, but as an individual, you got to keep your eyes and ears open as to how it's happening. You need to be polite and respectful in terms of constantly looking out for opportunities. I would say there are some employees who continuously look out for opportunities and then don't kind of put their entire concentration on it. So they find something new, and then they want to, in 2 weeks time they want to move to something else. I think it's important that you choose what you really want to do, and then constantly provide that feedback within your organization. If something comes up, you could be one of the team players on that. And sometimes just be an understudy. Just sometimes, yeah, you may be at a middle management position, but you can just be an intern, a so-called internal intern in a particular team, to just learn and show your skills. And I'm sure people would be on the lookout for professionals like yourself.
Very well said. I think that's really important to keep in mind. I would also just add, sometimes people are trying to move from one role to another. So maybe, one aspect is that you are working within HR.
Sorry, Arjun, there's some background noise. I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there's somebody's other than you is not on mute.
I'm not sure. Can somebody write to us in chat if you can hear us properly or if there are any audio issues? Okay. Vikrant, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can, but there's some background noise that's really happening. Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think, one of the things that I want to talk a little bit more about is shifting roles as well. So a lot of times people are not just thinking about growing within the same role, which is more common. Like if I'm an HR professional, I might say, okay, I'm on the sidelines. How do I grow more as an HR professional to be, within the core team who is gotten a seat at the table and, working on strategic initiatives, driving most critical objectives of the company, right? But at the same time, I think what is important is thinking about those professionals who may be dissatisfied from their current role, thinking about moving into something where they can have greater impact. And I've seen HR professionals actually getting into other types of roles as well. I mean, this one is a slightly more drastic example, and I know there will be skeptics around this, but um, one of the biggest examples of a professional who has achieved tremendous amount of success as an HR professional, not just in HR but within CXO roles and CEO roles, is the CEO of Chanel right now, Lena
Mhm.
Nair. She's a India-born uh, HR professional, and she worked within India, transitioned to Europe, and then ended up becoming the CEO of Chanel. Obviously, it wasn't overnight. It took her almost 3 decades of a career to, go through
Absolutely.
different, hustles and really proving herself as a people-centric leader. But she was able to transition to a CEO role. Now, in my career, have numerous examples of HR professionals, finance professionals, strategy operations professionals moving into very critical roles outside of their core ambit as well. And so for these, I think what you have to think about is number one, what are your superpowers, right? If you have, let's say, as an HR leader, you have identified that, okay, I do many things in HR, let's say performance management, org design, compensation. But what my superpower is really helping people upskill and coach them into giving their best. Right now,
Yes.
if you can understand what that superpower is, position it in alignment with the requirements of the organization to say that,
Sure.
what, this is my superpower. This is where I see the organization currently holding back on its potential, and I can utilize this superpower to help unlock that potential in this way, and being very very specific about it, right? Like what would you do if you got that opportunity? I think there are organizations, I won't say like all the Indian organizations, but that there are going to be certain organizations which would look at that as a trial opportunity, at least to see what you could potentially do. And I've seen folks move into like direct revenue generating roles like sales and marketing or P&L leadership many times. The other thing that I've seen, sorry Vikrant, I'll just take one more second. I would love your input on
Please.
this as well.
Yeah.
um, I've seen that sometimes you might be feeling like you're on the sidelines in a support function. Again, sorry, we are both HR background professionals, so we're taking a lot of examples from HR. But the other thing that I want to highlight in HR is, which is traditionally considered a support function. You could change the environment that you are in while staying in the same role, but becoming more strategically important for the organization. For example, you might be working in house at a startup as an HR professional, right? Doing the traditional HR things that we discussed. Now you feel like, no, I want to actually drive revenues of a company. So rather than necessarily shifting your role from an HR professional to something else, what you could also do is work for an HR tech organization, for example,
Yeah.
right? So rather than, let's say, you were working at an e-commerce organization or a B2B SaaS organization, you could think about targeting those organizations where your talent will be looked at more strategically important for that company. So if you're an HR professional, you can help them build their HR tech product. You can help them uh, utilize your network to bring more clients into the company, right? You can help an HR tech or an HR consulting or HR services organization in many
Sure.
more ways, driving business for them. So when you're thinking about making yourself more strategically important, you can do what exactly Vikrant was saying. How do you elevate yourself within the same function? But you also have these two other, I think, pathways to consider. One is changing your role. So for example, going from HR to, let's say, P&L leadership, vertical leadership like Lean and Iyer. Or you could also think about moving from let's say, an organization which does not value your talent, your skills that much, to an organization which will have more use cases, more strategically important use cases for your skill set. um,
Absolutely, Arjun. Since you mentioned Lean and I just have I know this person who I worked with almost about 15 years ago, and he was the head of IT in one of the organizations that where I worked with. And just yesterday morning, I saw a post on LinkedIn from him. He's become the CEO of his company, and it's an automotive manufacturing company. Okay, so it's not just HR people can become CEOs, IT people can also become CEOs. Okay, but I think it's important for us to for any individual to kind of constantly gain exposure across functions and learn new things. You could be a marketing person,
Absolutely.
taking up some Six Sigma skills and some project management skills and become like a project management professional. I myself had a particular situation where I had to manage a long-term transition for my company, and I worked very closely with the project management head on that. And through that entire 1 year activity, I ended up learning project management jargon, and how things were plotted on a timeline, and how things were achieved at an end-to-end level, uh, much more than how that person expected me to do that. And as an HR person, I once interviewed somebody who was a head of marketing in a company for an internal role. And after I interviewed him, I told that person, saying, "Wait, the head of marketing will come and meet you." And he said, "Oh, who were you? Who are you?" And I said, "I'm the head of HR." And they said, "Oh, but you asked all the marketing and all the technical questions. We never thought you're the HR guy. We thought you're going to be doing all the negotiation and checking the career gaps and stuff like that." So, but it was important for me as the HR person to understand whether that individual is the right fit for a marketing role within the organization. So it's sometimes, as even in I can say, from a learning perspective, a non-sales person can go out on the sales floor and experience what's in a day for a sales guy on the floor, out in the market, and understand those challenges. And if that excites you, why not? Because conventionally in India, people tend to, sometimes it doesn't happen now, but take up careers because of their uncle or aunt or their niece or their nephew or someone is doing well in that particular domain, and they suggested them that, okay, if you start working in logistics, it's going to be good. But you suddenly realize after 5 years in your career that I'm not a logistics person. I can do really well in marketing. I do great SEO and SEM work. Because I have my own Instagram channel and I have so many million followers. Why don't I pursue something like this? That those are the things that one would really want to look out for.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think very good examples. I'm really glad how we are, supporting the arguments with real life scenarios. I think that's really helpful to hear, Vikrant. Particularly liked, that example around people thinking you were from, sales marketing or, revenue generating kind of a background. Um, not It's not very frequent, but I think it it is why a lot of people get held back in their careers because they get pigeonholed as somebody who is just an HR professional, just an engineer, just an operations person doing only what they know best and what they've been doing for a long time without you know adding significantly more value than what is expected of them. So I think that's very, very good. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is relationships, right? A lot of times when you're, I mean, let's be frank, right? The world works still based on relationships. You can be great at what you do, but if you are a victim of internal politics, which I've seen many examples out there, things can go south for you, no matter how good you are. In fact, some of the tech CEOs that have, become large Silicon Valley company CEOs like Microsoft and Google today,
Yeah,
when we talk about why Indian talent actually rose to the top at those companies, a frequent example that's given is that they were apolitical. They knew how to navigate um, the internal dynamics of the company in a way which did not push buttons for people, right? Especially the leaders. Um,
absolutely.
while also giving their independent input. It's not like they're a pushover and they'll just do whatever you want them. So that tactfulness that you need as as an individual who's trying to rise up a complex organization hierarchy, it's not easy for most people today, right? Because you're competing amongst many people to go for that, let's say managerial role or leadership role. It's a pyramid shape, right? So most
Yes.
people will not rise in the top. So my question is, we have talked about skills, um, and how to add value, and that is all very, very critical. But at the same time, this is equally, if not more important, relationships, and do it in a way which doesn't feel transactional, doesn't feel like you're only asking for help or support, but really nurture them to feel like they're organic and they are two-sided. So whatever your thoughts are on this front, on nurturing relationships within your organization or maybe outside as well, would love to hear that.
I think, yeah, relationships are good and should be maintained and should be strengthened as much as we can. But the tendency of individuals, and I'm sorry being extremely blunt, we normally try to, where the upstream is much higher, where we know that if we just remain supportive to a particular individual, that's where we could get success. But it's important, to remain very honest, to remain trustworthy throughout any relationship within an organization. It's important that whether it's your manager, whether it's your colleagues, lend a helping hand, but be the critic that you should be when need comes. And in relationships, it's important that you constantly learn from each other, whether whether it's in terms of skills, whether it is in terms of navigating difficult situations, whether it's understanding how new business dynamic is handled and things like that. So a relationship just need not be saying, yeah, my manager likes me, I go on a Friday evening out with him and have a couple of beers, and that's where my promotion is guaranteed. I'd say go one up in terms of building various network relationships inside and outside of your organization. I've been in situations where the country head of the company, who hadn't spoken with me in the first year of him being in the organization ended up giving very high feedback about me to my HR director. And when I checked with the HR director suddenly gave me this feedback saying, the managing director was very appreciative of your work. And I said, well, I haven't, other than a good morning, I haven't done anything with him in the last 1 year. And he said, no, he observes how diligently you've been working on certain things, and when we present HR projects and stuff like that, the contribution that you've done in that is there. Sometimes in difficult times you've been working weekends, late hours, and things like that. So I'd say visibility happens, and visibility happens with the right people. You don't have to wear jazzy clothes and funky shades to be visible. Your work is visible, your credibility is visible. So it's important to stay honest and trust the system, rather than just trying to show that. From a relationship perspective, it's important that you keep your relationships credible. You nurture them with honesty in terms of constant feedback, learning from both ends, developmental conversations and things like that.
Yeah.
And also sometimes with senior leadership, you could also talk about how the industry is shaping up, how competition is shaping up, and you could learn more, because maybe if you report into the head of marketing for an organization, the head of marketing goes into conclaves where there are the heads of marketing of 20 other organizations, so he may have learned something there that he or she can share with you when they come back from such a webinar or a conference or whatever. So so the relationship is not just a one side street of being friends with somebody, but it's important that you do it in a more holistic perspective.
That's well put. Um, just one example I often talk about with a lot of people who know me. It is, my first mentor, who was actually of the founder of the company. He was, to be very candid, he was a mentor of my mentor. So I
Uh-huh.
still somehow got visibility because through my mentor, I just got a lot of visibility into that. And he was the founder of the company, almost 70-year-old, had built the industry from the ground up in US and considered a father figure in that industry. Now, I mean, very busy guy, very, wealthy, powerful, everything. But one of the things that he did, which was the smallest gesture, was leave post-it notes on people he worked with, their tables, right, their desks. And the post-it notes could be just two words. He might just sometimes say "nice work" with an exclamation. Sometimes he would say, "I'd love." He'd leave an article saying, "Would love to get an email with your thoughts on this." Sometimes he would, just appreciate something that you thought was unnoticed by most
Yeah.
people, right? And to be honest, I've since worked with, that was when I was 21. Since then, I've worked with hundreds of folks, and I've realized how uncommon that kind of a small gesture is, especially from leaders, especially from mid-tier managers also. They might do it in different ways, but to not just, like you said, be a sycophant to the most important people in the organization, but actually practice these small gestures on a day-to-day basis where you are helping others, but you're also acknowledging their efforts when they have done something for you, above and beyond. um, I think both of these, right, like helping others and noticing their efforts, it goes a long way. It really goes a long way. And I don't think people realize the amount of impact those small gestures can have if you do them consistently, how
Sure.
they compound over a period of time.
Yeah, and relationships are constantly evolving. So if you work with a particular set of people and you have strong relationships with them, it doesn't mean that you can't move ahead of that. Okay, you could build relationships with people in a different country within the same organization, and learn about their cultures and their processes and stuff like that. you
Yeah.
could you could build relationships people with people who are external stakeholders within your organization, to learn about how business works and influences their careers and those kind of things. So it is the time and the world to keep your eyes and ears open with regards to whatever information that comes to you and is positive and credible, and can really give you a standout from a career perspective.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, Vikrant, I just want to, we don't have a lot of time left, so, and I think we have covered a lot of ground. So it's been a very, enlightening, very interesting conversation. I hope for our audience, not just for me as well. But what I would love to, kind of close the session with is really focusing on the most important, most impactful learnings that you have had in your career with regard to aiming for growth from a pay and promotion perspective, right? I think we have already covered a lot of them, but if you were to distill your most important learnings, in your lengthy career, what would you kind of want to leave our audience of, mid-career professionals really focused on?
Yeah, sure. I think it is very important, and I also want to bring in the perspective of a much more younger generation who's at the workforce today, who expects a very high level of engagement, very high level of transparency, uh, constant motivation and recognition as far as their work is concerned. I just request those individuals also to be a little patient when it comes to their careers, because success comes and success doesn't come right away, but it needs a little bit of extra hard work, toiling, and stuff like that. And sometimes you need to get through the muddy waters to get through, the best things in life. So one is, I would say in today's environment, it's important to have very good problem solving skills. Okay, it's important that you volunteer to take up certain situations in your department which other people say cannot be resolved, and you understand the entire process and help resolve, work with stakeholders, uh, so that you become this one point of contact for any kind of challenge that comes up, saying this man or this lady can do it because they've done it in XYZ situations. That's very, very important. A very high level of attention to detail is very, very critical. Okay, because we're talking about business numbers, we're talking about the reputation and credibility of the company. It's important that we do that. Okay. I worked with media organizations and strong editorial people who really pulled their teams up if a particular comma or a colon was missing. And sometimes when I read some of the news apps, and I notice that there's grammatical mistakes or some mistakes, I immediately remember those very tough editorial heads who I've worked with, because being casual is not what can get you to success. Okay, there are the world is changing, but there are certain old rules, that formulas that always help. It's important to constantly keep networking with different people across industry, or within your line of work, to understand how the functions are changing, what are the new kind of roles coming up. I'd say even if you're not interested in applying for new job opportunities, I would still encourage you to go ahead and read some of the job postings on various job boards. Okay, you get to know some
That's
new
a
terminology.
really that's a really good point. No, please continue, but I love
Yeah.
that point. Thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah, so go ahead and read something, and you'll find out, hey, see, this happens, this is a marketing requirement in XYZ company. I don't do it. What is this all about? Okay, so you find out, you Google it, you put it on Chat GPT or whatever, and read about it. Or maybe some of your relatives or your friends who are working in that particular domain or a similar organization would want to go, and you may spend half an hour with them over a cup of coffee and understand what that works. It's also important to constantly understand development plans, etc., that your organization would be doing it, would be giving in for you. And constant feedback and communication with your managers in terms of how you're performing. Where is it? Where are the challenges coming up? What is something that you really need to work on? What do you do very well that you can enhance further from a career perspective is very critical. I think it's also very important to think what a particular function or an organization is going to look from a future perspective. Okay, because especially you mentioned COVID and the ambiguity around COVID, and how business is in that particular situation. I think all of us should constantly think, what if something like COVID or COVID came up again? How would we live life in that particular situation? Okay, we had a difficult situation of just being with in our homes with our families and stuff like that. That was a different situation altogether. But also from a business perspective, how would you do HR or marketing when the physical person is not going to be there? So it's important to strengthen processes very well, in a streamlined manner, in the kind of role that you're doing, so that they just run in a more seamless manner. And gradually, if I'm just giving an example. Suppose you're a data analytics person, and if you develop some kind of an internal software wherein constantly data can be fed in from various sources, and it churns out analytics bang on and gives it to business leaders, you are then upskilling yourself to take on the next level role in the organization. Otherwise, you could just remain a data entry or a data analytics person, or an order to cash person and stuff like that. So it's important for you to think about the future. Yeah, we are not astrologers to be predicting stuff, but to understand what's going on in the market. And we get all that information and try. Every organization also has its maturity levels. Okay, if you work for a Google or a Nestle, yeah, you may have more opportunities. But if you work for a mid-level company, or an Indian organization which has its limitations, I can understand that there's only a particular scope that you could go to. But think about the future and how you want to align your role with it. Because that's what leadership is. You either train somebody to take up your role and then move up to the next one, or you make your role redundant and move to the next best thing that's available.
Yeah. No, I think all very strong, very valid points. I think we have covered a lot of information. Thankfully, this is a recorded session, so folks who could not join us because of busy weekday evening, could hopefully watch it over the weekend. But yeah, with that said, I think we've come to a close for today's session. Vikrant, thank you so much again for joining. I think I think the flow of the conversation was really powerful, but what was really interesting are the kind of examples that you were able to share with us from your
Yes.
your years of experience. And because the world of work is changing so rapidly and people feeling bit uncertain, bit at risk because of layoffs, AI, all the change that is happening today, I think understanding these first principles, um, timeless principles that will help you navigate through these complexities and uncertainties, I think it's very, very important. So I hope people were able to take something away from this session that they can apply and actually get to see some positive results in their career. In case you feel that you need some personalized support, some personalized help, please feel free to connect. I'll take this liberty on your behalf, Vikrant. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but please feel free to connect with Vikrant on LinkedIn.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yes. And, Vikrant Mathur, you can just go on LinkedIn, search for him. You'll find his profile quite easily. Connect with him. You can also reach out to me. You have my name in the signature. I'm also quite active on LinkedIn, so happy to connect there. You can also check out our website, which is mypivot.work. We'll just put the link as well, um, in the chat, so you can check it over there. But thank you to everybody for joining, and special thanks again to Vikrant for sharing all the immense insights.
Thanks, Arjun. I think, yes, sometimes in our careers we have high points and low points, and I just say to the professionals who may just, you know, seeing certain ambiguity and certain challenges in their careers at this period in time, just stay hopeful, positive, uh, gather as much as information as you can to make your career better, or to make it different, and I'm sure things are going to work out for you very very soon. So it's great to have this conversation. Yeah, as an HR person, I do it day in and day out, but just putting my mind aside and talking about it to help someone, I'm definitely happy to do that. We'll be glad to connect with any other people who would want to learn more from me at any point in time.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, everybody, for joining. And please do connect with Vikrant or myself and check out our website. I hope you have a great rest of the evening.